Hey everybody, this is PD from the Spinner Rack, and today I'm doing a video on the Avengers. More specifically, John Byrne's time. Well, it's almost 2 years. Was it almost? It's over a year on the Avengers, like a year and 6 months. But he amassed what might be, I think, almost 30 issues. That would be with the Avengers. I think it's over 30 because it's like Wolf will be able to number this up in a second. But here they are. This is close to the team. Let's extract. We don't have um, Dr. Pym here, but we have the She-Hulk. But she showed up in the West Coast Avengers for a couple of issues. So this is a good benchmark. But what we want to do is talk about. Here we go. What if John Byrne stayed on the Avengers? And since there was two titles, we're going to get into both of them, both things that happened, and basically centered around an Immortus storyline, right? So John Byrne was hired to take over the West Coast Avengers, and he what happened? He was I think I think this is right after he left DC. Even though he'd already come back to Marvel with Starbrand, he um, he actually had what was it? He actually This was like the first big official one. Like the Starbrand was a regular one, but this was like the big thing that was coming out, like the first thing. And once it hit, the sales for the West Coast Avenger, which was the idea to get Byrne on it and see if we could bring the title back up. And the title jumped up with seemingly 50,000 more readers to the book. So the book was, as you could say, moving on up, right? But this is the period where we had the X-Men was killing it. We also had Punisher killing it, and then Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man is also killing it. So this is a tough time in comic books. And Avengers was never the top seller of Marvel. There's just certain periods where they were doing pretty decent, but this is like the first time. So basically, it was two big storylines that were going on. There was the Vision storyline with Vision Quest, which we've done that before, where Vision would have finally pay for what he'd done, taking over the world computers, and Scarlet Witch. Now, Scarlet Witch would go through a number of things, which I think I've documented. I guess we haven't, so I guess I need to do a video on that. But it should have came out around the time of WandaVision. But we had a thing where Wanda's kids, which I have talked about, Wanda's kids were actually disappearing. We also had a storyline where her mind was altered by this thing that which endures, the thing that kind of jumps to the next stage of evolution and leaves ones that we've seen that are dying out, possibly like the Cro-Magnon and something like that, or Neanderthal, like why we don't see these sort of humans anymore, saying what was in them kind of left. So, but that kept her a very darker sort of person before she went bad, right? So, so we had that. Then she lost the kids, and then John Byrne really started to pick up steam with the Acts of Vengeance. Walter Simonson was off the title, so he was writing both of them. And then it was abruptly stopped right when the Immortus saga was just getting underway, right? We got 2 issues out, and two issues solicited, but then we saw that it wasn't, Byrne was gone. And it's one of the first where people really started saying, oh, he just left, he just leaves titles, right? So let's get out of this for now. Let's stop that. And ultimately, let's deal with what should we deal with? The storyline? I guess we deal with the storyline first, right? So, sorry about this. I'm just going to go to, I don't know why I'm missing. All right, so here we go. I'm almost there. All right, so if we look at this page, during Byrne's storyline, they had this subplot with Immortus in the fourth dimension, just um, watching Scarlet Witch as she goes through all this stuff, and she's struggling that the two storylines I mentioned kind of took her of out of his hands, and even though it was pushing her more towards him, during these periods he couldn't do anything to protect her, right, and protect everything that he was doing. So when she comes back and she's out, he's going through time of the 16th century. I think it's with Queen Elizabeth, and he's there, and he somehow has interjected himself into the timeline, and as he gets to the end, he wipes it out, right? He's able to wipe it out and kill another divergent. So it's similar to the storyline where Kang was killing other Kangs. His plan is to wipe out entire divergence, things that didn't happen in history, and then create a timeline only of him, right? So here's one where you have John Wilkes Booth and Immortus there. They know that he's there, and the, and Abe Lincoln reacts when he hears the hammer click, and they get rid of John Wilkes Booth, and then Immortus gets rid of that timeline, right? So I think he also gets rid of Tigra and his plans. And here's the big thing right here, right? She goes mad. Well, seemingly, we're not sure what happens, but when she appears, she's totally changed, right? And one of the first things that happened was, but let me stop here for a second, right? I'm going to show you some of this other stuff. I should have had these together, but I showed you the new costume. It's going to lead to something else, right? So here we go again, right? So we Wanda in her new costume. Now this is a costume that was just for her going bad, right? This wasn't the plan for the entire thing, but one of the issues that I think I had it somewhere where Tom DeFalco was kind of had the issue that she got a new costume, that any new costumes had to be approved by the office. Now, Byrne had sent it to editorial, but since it was just for the storyline of her going bad, it wasn't a permanent change. But DeFalco had issue with that. That's one of the things he had issue with. Now, a lot of people like to go to this panel here, right? Now, this panel is the original panel where you see Wanda take off Wonder Man's shirt, right? And he says no. And she did something to him, but we don't know what it is, right? Now, when it was first sent in, no one had issue with it. But then I think he said Jack Abel, who was the proofreader, he saw it and thought it was fellatio. So they decided that they would have her dig into his skin, and they art directed and fixed it. So this was the actual issue. It was already fixed, right? So this wasn't an actual issue that happened. So I think there was another site that tried to kind of say this is why Tom DeFalco had issue with it, and it would be nothing of the sort because they said that they fixed it. But I think with Kurt Busiek and a bunch of other people, they turned this myth into real sort of thing that he could have had issue with this. I think there was an online thing, right? We're not going there. We just got to cut to the chase, right? So we haven't even gotten to what would have happened in the what if part of it, right? So we've been giving you the background of this storyline. Now it's been on Byrne's site for a while, so you should have known. It's been answered what was going to happen, right? So then this is where he got into trouble with. This is the scene. He talked about it in John Byrne Threat of Menace. They said what happened. Why did he say he wanted to get out of the trenches of the the Avenger titles? And he said, saying that it sounded like it was a denigrating term of doing monthly comic books. He was like, no, I was talking about the trenches of dealing with the Avengers editorial. That I couldn't really do anything while they were in power. They weren't going to allow me to do stuff that was even approved, right? So Scarlet Witch powers have been related to probabilities, right? So Byrne added the scene, right? In what was it? Supposed to be around after issue 43, right? Where she has titanium bar that has no flaws in it, 100% certainty, right? So when she points her hex power, it falls apart, right? And he expects that. But then he says, hey, look, see, you can scan and we see one picture is before and after. And then Scarlet Witch says, aren't they identical? And he's like, well, I might have made up the wrong image. And then he's like, wait a second. That means you're doing something retroactive. But we know your powers don't work like that. And then now in seeing that her powers are that she's been kind of, pointing to her full potential. Now we didn't get to see what Magneto was going to do afterwards, but it was a whole build up from Roger Stern's storyline where he wanted who was it? Where Roger Stern had a storyline where he wanted Quicksilver to get retribution against Magneto. That was his plan, right? So let's get on to the good stuff, I guess. So after that, Tom DeFalco sees it. He's like, the powers don't work like that. And Byrne says, you approve this? And he said, no, I didn't approve this. What did I do? He said, I rejected it during the annuals. When we were talking about the annuals, and Byrne was like, no, we were talking about doing the annuals and using this storyline for the annuals, and we would, like he said, he could accelerate it, and it would be for the annuals, and then the other people were throwing in ideas, And he said, no, maybe not for the ambulance. So he went on doing the storyline, and Tom Falco said it was, it was he rejected it. Mark Runwell said it wasn't rejected. I think Mark Runwell said it. I think everyone in the room said it wasn't rejected. And Tom DeFalco said, yes, it was. You can't do this. And it was also related to the new costume. So he was just kind of decided that it can happen. And so in my mind, so let's go into what was going to happen, right? So if we go in the big plot, is that Immortus was going to use Kang to take, you know, go through a timeline where he beats the Avengers. So he would make that the real timeline where instead of in Avengers 5, where man, I forgot to do that. Where the Avengers win, they would lose, right? So we can get an idea. We have the crime of the century. I don't know if anything was drawn, but here's the image of the cover after issue 57, right? It's 57, right? Where we see Immortus, he's coming into the forefront. The new Brotherhood is back, but Quicksilver would have to turn on him, which the same like you saw in Roy Thomas's issue. But the next issue is the big one, right? Where Byrne redoes Kirby's cover, and the Avengers lose that. And one of the things that even before Walter Simonson left, the idea was that when they talked over each other, they were like, we're both doing the Avengers, we're both utilizing they're both Avengers team. There's not a secondary one. So it's been fun to see how they were going to work things out together. But the idea was that Kang would win. They'd be in a future that was a dark place, even with him winning in this period, which was his whole plan. And then, but there was one contingency that who was it? The Black Knight. The Black Knight would literally, in this new timeline, would literally drop out of space because Thor had placed him. He was injured and he was frozen. Right, his body had stiffened. So in this new timeline, that was gone, but he was stuck in a place, and he kind of plops out, and then he goes and tries to find the heroes, and he gathers the heroes together um, to defeat Immortus, and that's how the storylines would play out, right? So it'll be just going through. It'll be similar to what happened in Kurt Busiek and um, what is it? Sake and George Perez's first story, where the heroes would gather together and then they would fight against the foe. Right? So it wasn't a plan for permanent thing for um for Scarlet Witch, but it was through these unfortunate events that would lead her down this path, right? So then, so I gave you that. But one of the other things, let's see, things the other things that happened was, let's see if we can do this. So we had this other issue since Walter Simonson had bailed on it. Byrne had taken over the book at issue 305, and Spider-Man was helping out the team. Similar, using two storylines, Byrne keeps the idea that you know keeps the idea that at one point Thor went and enlisted Spider-Man in a Jim Shooter comic book. And says, hey, we need new Avengers. Let me go find Spider-Man. And Spider-Man turns him down. This time they meet up, and then Thor says, let's go. And Spider-Man's like, but I'm not Avenger. So he goes in, he helps save, basically he's there, and the Avengers team are fighting Nebula, and they're stuck. They're the only ones left. The whole universe is gone, right? So they're fighting Nebula, and Spider-Man kind of saves the day because they're the only ones that can stop it, and they're able to stop Nebula for the moment. Nebula has another plan, right? So they get in there. They're still after Nebula, but the Nebula is trying to bring in the Stranger, right, from space. So then, so for me, I was like, this storyline was really good. It's really action packed. Spider Man is funny, and Captain America's going through the storyline, and he's like, "No, wait a second. This Spider Man is bringing out the best in us, right? More so than my speeches." So he kind of like Thor was having some humor, and I should go through this book, but I'll do it at a later date if you're interested in seeing it because it's really fun. And then I think the stranger shows up, right? And then this issue, to my surprise, Byrne was only doing the plot. And then the book goes, shoo, it blows up in a negative way. Where Spider Man, who kind of was a help to the team, becomes a liability in the entire thing. Like me and a friend of mine, we were on the phone about this. And it was just like, what is going on here? And I was saying, well, no, Byrne just plotted it. It's not his, he didn't finish it, right? And then the next story, Byrne is totally out, where Nebula gets kind of like the Stranger's powers. And Spider-Man wants to beat her up after she's done, and he just not working with the team. And then Captain America asks him to go back to leave. Now the plan was for Spider-Man to stay, right? And he said he's going to be a key part in the Immortus storyline, right? Because there are going to be some aspects of his life that changed, right? So they would be able to do certain things with him too. So it was one of the things that, and I'm not sure if Spider-Man would have stayed after that point, but he was going to stay for a while the Immortus storyline was going on. So ultimately, he wouldn't leave here. And my last bit is to say, which I think I said before once, right? I did say before once. But we're going to show it again. This is my last bit. Excuse me. So we look here. This is the last month reported on in that I have available to see comic sales in 1989. This is October, right? So at this point, the acts of vengeance is happening, right? And we don't have any reports of anything post that part, but this is giving you the monthly thing. And if you look at this, as I've said a few times, let's see. The Batman books these are a couple new Batman books. Batman's are kind of selling really good. X-Men's still selling. Wolverine is the top 10. Byrne's doing that. But Spider-Man's in the top 10. New Titans with Perez. So more for Marvel, it's X-Men, The Amazing Spider-Man, the X titles, Amazing Spider-Man, and then it's Punisher, right? So, but at the same time, you see Byrne's Avengers West Coast right under the Punisher, right? And then you see the regular Avengers under this other Spider-Man titles. The Spider-Man titles were doing pretty decent. These are the top of the line of the Marvel books, right? So had Byrne, if I wish I had some later dates after this to see if it went up anymore. But at the same time, it's over one book, The New Mutants, right? And McFarlane, no, sorry, not McFarlane. Liefeld would be on here next. So I wish I had numbers so you could see how it was doing against that, because you can see a dip when the summer annuals happen, but it picks back up when this is the storyline. But it hasn't beat, even though it's a crossover event, it's not knocking out like the the other titles. All the other, like, this is Cosmic Spider-Man is here. We have Wolverine versus Byrne doing that. We have I think this is Lady Mandarin. This is them in space, and I don't know if they had a crossover thing. So ultimately, with the increased sales, it'd be tough to see. I don't know. In my mind, would a editor want to kill that, the fact that the Avengers were not necessarily the top, but they were doing rather well. So then we go to here. We don't have stuff from the 90s, which would be great, but no, this doesn't have anything for this one, right? So we got to go to August. That's going to be too far gone, and the X-Men are here. So with X-Men are here, X-Men #1. So we got it's a bloating. It's a serious bloating of the comic thing, but the Avengers are gone, right? Editorial has swept the Avengers down to the top 40, right? And the West Coast Avengers, they're really far down. So you see how far it's gone. I couldn't show you what's in the 90s, but in 91 I can show in 1990, but I can show you in Avengers. I think it looks like it's 2 a month, right? So it's kind of sad that the title has dropped. Even the annual is down. So what can you do? I think that's a sad case of a book that was selling, that was having a lot of energy, same energy that was going on in the X books. But it would be interesting to see where it would ended up post that part. Why would you go from a book that's in the top 20 to a book, two books in the top 20 to two books in the top 60, right? Which is on the bottom of the top six of the 60 top comics. That would be a better way to describe it. So, I mean, I think the Avengers might have been in a better place. I don't know if they would have got to #1 or past the Punisher, but he's bringing some energy to it. You can see there was a bump up with the Axe Avengers for the regular Avenger title. West Coast, of course, was doing well since Byrne was doing it, but if they were going to be a converge, and I can't even tell you what the sales on Spider-Man's first time with the Avengers. So I wish I could, but yeah, it would have been. It was a sad moment to see that this stuff is gone. So I just want to put that out there, and that's about it. Spinnerack is out.